What do you think he thinks about this? This guy leaving a trail of blood, animals bloodied in the you-know-what area from this guy. He says, in my professional opinion, if Mr. Basangio can be provided with the pharmacological treatment suggested above, as well as with proper probationary support, and with supervision, well, geez, why don't you hire a babysitter? I do believe he can remain in the community without continued use, and he won't pose an unacceptable risk to animals. That's not true at all. If that's true, and you say, okay, we're going to move this guy right next to your grandkids, don't you worry, he poses no risk. Oh, he'll be out in the yard waving to your grandkids and wanting to pet the puppy, and sometimes he'll say, hey, how are you kids doing? But, you know, it's never that way, is it? You get these guys making these big six-figure salaries, and this is what you get. Now, inmate in custody after escaping from Jackson County Prison. Oh, okay, this will be something. Georgia, Jackson County, but this is Jefferson, Georgia. So a man convicted of several crimes in Metro Atlanta is back in custody after escaping from the Jackson County Correctional Institute in Jefferson. Marcus Mahaffrey escaped from outside the grounds at a fleet maintenance shop. Now, it says he's the third inmate to walk away from Georgia in recent weeks. Jared William Pardue of Douglas County escaped from a mobile work detail at the Central Prison in Macon and was later arrested. Do you folks know what a mobile work detail is? Think chain gang. That's called a mobile work detail now. While we're at it, let's go into Johannesburg. 2 more escaped prisoners nabbed. Now here's how they do it in Africa. These guy's black. He looks kind of like Flip Wilson. He's called the 7th escapee, Giagoni Sandel. He was arrested on Friday at Sophiatown, and the police, of course, talked about, you know, what they had to do to catch him. Remember when Larry Holmes, the fighter who used to fight Muhammad Ali, he had to go to a place called Sun City in South Africa? Well, that's what this thing here is all about. These guys are up to that stuff. And they had a guy kind of came out of the woods with rifles and stopped it was a truck, it wasn't even a prison bus, and got their buddies off somehow. Next, dangerous inmates who escaped from Bethel jail apprehended. Now here's one I got a little heat on when I originally reported on this. Since we don't have a way for you to look at these pictures, if the guy's white, I say he's white, what he looks like. If he's black, I say he's black. Well, here's a case where I used the term Eskimos. Well, who do you think is up in the Kuskokwim River at the Alaska Department of Corrections up that far? Well, how's Wilson Beaver? What's that sound like? And Carl Koenig. I took a look at him. Now, I know that there's natives in Alaska, natives or Indians, and there's also Eskimos. When they're not drinking and they're not in cycle for violence, they're great folks. They're fantastic people. But I called it what they were, and come to find out I was absolutely right. Anyway, the officials, the authorities, cannot explain how these 2 guys got out, how they were able to escape the Yukon Kuskokwim Correctional Center Friday or Saturday. In other words, the warden couldn't tell you what the heck's going on there. But I don't know if it was Friday or Saturday when they got. He can't play the film back because probably were the cameras working? How many staff were in charge with this? Were working when these guys got loose? Now these guys, one's a real bad guy. He's a convicted sexual offender, and he's one of these guys that he finally was arrested by Bethel police. It says here it's still under investigation, and they have strong violent criminal histories. Well, I knew that when I first told you guys that, and I already told you they were very dangerous. One of the guys, now here's how they use soft words for Mr. Beaver. They say he broke in to a lady's, she was in there sleeping with her kids. He put a knife to the female's throat. Okay, he puts a knife to her throat while the children were in the residence. Okay, the children in the residence. He threatened her with violence, like cut her throat in exchange for sex. That's called forcible rape, or rape at knife point. But the soft words are just, he just put the knife to the female's throat. Jeez. Beaver was also a first-degree sexual assault conviction in the early 2000s. That's a big surprise. Now, the other inmate, Carl Koenig, he's the one that kind of looks like kind of an Indian / Eskimo, more so, has a history of assault convictions. At the time of the escape, he was in jail on 2 felony assault charges, including one involving a serious injury with a weapon. Again, the warden can't tell you what day these guys broke out. Do you see anything wrong with this picture here? You think somebody should maybe be looking for a new job? Or get somebody who can at least look at the camera, look at the film and say, hey, it's empty, it's Friday, or it's empty, it's Saturday. Tell us when these guys got out. Anyway, they were last seen on video surveillance at 11:21 on Friday, but it's not clear when or how jail employees discovered they were gone. You see how they cover for the employees? It's not clear how jail employees discovered. Well, of course it's clear. Once they woke up, or I shouldn't say that. That's a little bit of speculation. Anyway, this Kuskokwim correctional facility houses about 200 male and female inmates, mostly pretrial detainees. Now, the last person to escape was back in 2015. That was a sex offender. Remember Kevin Tuckfield? He escaped actually from a high security unit for mentally ill prisoners at the Anchorage jail. That's tough to get out of. He roamed the city before being apprehended. Again, it's not clear what Beaver and Coney did during the night and the day that they were out of jail, but they'll be charged with escape. Yeah, I wonder what they did. Jesus, we better start counting all the cats and dogs and pets and everything else in that place. They're being held, well, we already know where they're being held. Next up, Aussie fugitive demands $3.5 million in Bitcoin for a media interview after Bali prison escape. Now, this is one you don't hear every day. This is an Australian prison breaker, Sean Davidson. He's on the run from authorities after breaking out of a Bali prison. He's demanding $3.5 million in Bitcoin for a media phone interview. He's going to tell you how he did something that nobody else could do, which is a 15-meter tunnel under Bali's overcrowded prison. And now as he runs around taunting people, I mean, he shows up sometime in Singapore, and he's taunting, sometimes he's showing up at these different parts of the world. I think in Brazil, he taunts whoever's after him here. It doesn't say. It just says authorities. However you do that, you taunt authorities. There's a woman that says she's using an app. It's like ChapNat. It's spelled W-I-C-K-R. They use this app to communicate. He makes these demands for this money. And he was also taken to Facebook to regularly taunt. Now he's taunting the Australian law enforcement officers. And sometimes he's in Indonesia. And lastly, he was posting from a village in Barbados. And he just runs around having the time of his life. Have you heard anything about that? I haven't. Probably end up getting a movie deal. Well, next, former prison guard indicted in cell phone smuggling case. Oh boy, this is the same. Yeah, well, did I tell you it was true? Yeah, it is true, isn't it? These guys, I mean, how are these phones getting in? Well, you want to give me $1 for every guard? Now again, this is one guard. I've got an article that has 40 guards are facing discipline in one area for smuggling and losing their jobs. 40 of them. A federal grand jury has indicted a former correctional officer and 2 other men. See, there's that thing, folks. These other people floating around prisons, these other contractors, these other people from the privatization spectrum sometimes. Former correctional officer Charles Daniel Lynn, spelled with 2 N's, was indicted this month for conspiracy to defraud through bribery. Oh, okay, I thought he was actually smuggling cell phones in. But see, they're going to get that down real low for him. Lynn is from El Reno. He was also charged with accepting a bribe. The other 2 men who were charged with bribery of a public official, the federal indictment was made public Wednesday. Who were the other 2 men and how do they fit in this prison? You're never going to find that out unless you hire a detective. Now, federal prosecutors reported $7,750 in wire transfers to Lynn as alleged bribes to smuggle this contraband in. This inmate named Castillo Garza, through the prison to distribute the contraband, according to allegations. All right, Castillo Garza is serving a prison sentence for illegal re-entry into the United States after deportation. So he's running this crime ring, and he's compromising staff. Speaking of bribes, you know the Bible only mentions bribes 6 times in it. The first one is 1 Samuel 8:3, mentions bribes. The last time the word bribe or bribes or bribery, any form of that word is in Amos 5:12. Let's just go ahead and read a little bit of Amos 5:12. I read, "For I know your manifold transgressions and your mighty sins. They afflict the just, they take a bribe, and they turn aside the poor in the gate from their right." So talks about the prudent shall keep silent in that time, for it is an evil time. So the Bible talks, just a little bit about bribes here. I don't want to make a big deal about it. This next one, I don't think we have time to finish it. Well, once I've opened the door, I can't read them. This is about a female guard who was grabbed by a cop killer and repeatedly stabbed. Where else? Well, in a high-security jail. Of course, yeah. A lifer who murdered a policeman has allegedly knifed a woman prison officer, what would that be, okay, in a maximum security jail. David Bieber, spelled B-I-E-B-E-R, is accused of grabbing her from behind and repeatedly slashing her neck, hands, and arms with a 12-inch blade. Now, David Bieber here, they've got his face kind of covered up, so I can't make the call on him. But a source said, now see a source, the warden's not having to tell what happened to his staff. Nobody's responsible, so they quote a source. Says this was a savage attack. She's lucky to be alive. Now, Bieber is a high-risk prisoner in one of Britain's toughest jails, yet he has apparently been able to get a deadly weapon. There must be an urgent inquiry. You think? Now, it's unclear if the weapon used at Long Larson prison was a knife or an implement made into a blade. Who cares? You have a breakdown in security. The warden's not holding a press conference and taking his hit and turning things around. Who cares how he made the thing? Now, this guy Bieber's an American. That's why I'm reporting it to you guys. He was a fugitive. He's wanted for murdering somebody in Florida. He shot dead a guy named Ian Broadhorse. And now the drug dealer and steroid-addicted bodybuilder also attempted to kill 2 other officers. He was caught after a manhunt and is serving 37 years. I just don't know how you can do this stuff. I don't. And how did he get behind her? Now, the Ministry of Justice said, now, not a person, it's not a person's name, Ministry of Justice, that's like Standard Oil says. Somebody says, we don't tolerate violence against our hard-working prison staff. Huh, you don't, huh? At least Glenn Travis put his name out. He's from the Prison Officers Association. I take my hat off to him. He says it's a miracle we're not grieving for a murdered colleague. Jeez. I don't think we're going to do some. We will do one. The word violent or some form of that, like violently or something like that, is only mentioned 20 times in the Bible. Genesis 21:25 is when the first time it happens to do it. Probably Psalm 7:16 is probably the one that applies most to this, what we just read. I read, his mischief shall return upon his own head, and his violent dealing shall come down upon his pate. Now, you might say, well, that hasn't hurt that. If you follow this stuff long enough, like I have, now I'm not swearing and guaranteeing that this guy is going to get his one of these days sooner rather than later. In prison terms, 3 years is about right. It's soon, and 5 years is later on a grudge like this. You see in 3 to 5 years what happens to this guy. All these biblical references that I'm telling you, that I'm giving you, it just, there's something out there. There's like an ebb and flow of justice. Some people call it divine retribution. Let me read one more verse here, Psalm 140, and key into the word violent as I read this thing. That's what we're doing here, studying a biblical representation of the word violent. Keep me, O Lord, from the hands of the wicked. Preserve me from the violent man, who have purposed to overthrow my goings. Does that sound like what happened to this female correctional officer? The proud have hid a snare for me in cords. They have spread a net by the wayside. They have set gins for me. Selah. I said unto the Lord, Thou art my God. Hear the voice of my supplications, O Lord. Do you think this woman might have been a believer? It might have been crying out, Jesus, help, oh God, Jesus, or something like that, perhaps? You're probably not going to report it if she did, but it's possible this thing I just read you, these 3 brief verses, could have something very, very close to kind of road mapping these instances that takes place. Well, folks, that's it for now. I actually get a little bit fatigued reading this stuff. You might say, well, you're in the wrong business then. Well, it's not that, folks. It's not that. It's just that, the people are great. The speaker is great. It's this content, constantly these darn wardens and these administrative types, elites in the administration, aren't doing their job. They're never held accountable for losing control of the institution.